All right, I'll call the meeting to order.
The meeting has been posted according to open meeting laws.
Roll call.
President Johnson.
Here.
President Trustee. Trustee Ranucci.
Yes.
Yeah. Commissioner Arndt. Commissioner Batani.
Here.
Commissioner Hayes.
Here.
Commissioner Lederhelse.
Here.
And Commissioner Morath. Thank you.
All right, we'll do citizen participation per Village Resolution 2017-01. Anyone wishing to address the Plan Commission during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject must specifically relate to matters under the jurisdiction of the Plan Commission, whether on the agenda or not. The Plan Commission should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of the publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of the citizen participation segment, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they are participating in a public hearing or specifically allowed by a majority vote of the Plan Commission due to involvement in an agenda item. Tom?
Tom Senf, 2141 Church Street, representing Oak Ridge Cemetery. In regard to the Starbucks property, as it butts up against the cemetery, in reading some of the information that I received, I'm kind of surprised that some of this wasn't looked into initially when some of the permits were granted, because it says here, proposed conditional use in its proposed location and as depicted on the required site plan does not result in a substantial or undue adverse impact on nearby property, the character of the neighborhood, environmental factors, traffic factors, public movement, property right-of-way, or other matters. The way the property was cleared, which I understand all of the trees ended up to be on their property, just left the cemetery sitting wide open like, a bump on a log. And we're concerned about the lack of privacy and dignity that we're going to have now for burials. I have talked to Tim, I talked to Ray, and, we're trying to keep on top of this and look into what could be done as far as a border along there, especially where the drive-through lane is. According to the paperwork, it states that it could handle 14 vehicles at once, which I doubt if that's going to happen in East Troy, but you don't know. And that's only 10 feet away from our property line. So if we have burials going on, we like to have it quiet, like to have some privacy for families that are mourning the loss of a loved one. When they did Highway 20 construction, the road crew was unbelievable. If they knew we were having a burial, they basically would stop work so it wasn't noisy. So I'm hoping that we get that much consideration as we go forward to what's going to happen on the border. Ray said he is meeting with the property manager this week and will let me know what's going on. But just want to keep on top of things, and I hope that you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Other items for citizen participation? Oh. Can you come up and, you have, because we have this recorded and streamed, so I know. Thank you. So if you could
All
just
right.
state your name and address, please.
My name is Karen Wagner-Holtz, and I live at North 8659 Wilmer's Landing, East Troy, Wisconsin. And I had asked, there's a subdivision, the Belinsky subdivision on ES and Thomas Road. There is a 10-acre parcel that they've been cutting like 5 times a year, which doesn't make sense to me, and there's little woods next to it. It creates greenhouse gas. It doesn't make sense to cut it. And they have okayed that land being turned back into a prairie. So, and I'm the person that asked that be done, and I would like to get a task force together of people to help me do that. I've been collecting prairie seeds for about 5 years, so I have a lot of seed of different types, so. And what got me interested in this was when they built the Belinsky subdivision, they put in a drainage ditch. And in the drainage ditch laid dormant all these prairie roots, probably for 100 years or more. And it sprouted a prairie, and it brought up all these huge, beautiful plants. Looked awesome, and now they've been cutting it like 5 times a year, and they've just they probably have, they're dead now at this point. But all of Wisconsin, all of southeastern Wisconsin used to be prairie, and that's how we got our fertile land. I mean, it goes like 5 feet down, our lands do, from the prairie plants. So, and building a prairie has lots of benefits to the environment. It reduces greenhouse gas, reducing mowing the area, food for butterflies, bees, various insects and animals. It builds the topsoil, reduces runoff. It's a nesting spot for wildlife. It adds beauty and interest for walking. Also helps East Troy reputation as an environmentally friendly place. And it preserves the prairie flower species too. So I'm glad you guys have okayed this. I didn't have to come by. I just thought that I would, to just say why this is important. So yeah.
I appreciate you coming. I would just ask that you maybe connect with staff. I just want to make sure we do have a permitting process so that people don't have to, they can do like a natural lawn and things like that. And we do that even on some village-owned property. So if you could connect with staff later this week, either just stop by or give a call. I just want to make sure we get the right information on the right property and all of that, okay?
Okay.
That is Belinsky's property, though, right, that we're discussing?
Well, and that's what I understand property ownership and then permitting for that, if we need to involve the property owner, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much land it is. It looks like to be about 10 acres, so, yeah. So, and they're going to continue to cut a path, but not clear cut it. They would just cut it once in the late fall.
Okay.
So the trees don't grow up, so.
This wasn't discussed at Park and Rec, was it?
They're having a meeting right now, and I had not heard that this had been approved. I thought it was being brought to them. Yeah, are you looking for the Plan Commission, or are you looking for the Park and Rec meeting? The Parks and Recreation.
I'm not sure.
This is the Plan Commission meeting, and Park and Rec meeting is actually in meeting room B.
All right.
Because I know that you had I spoke with you on the phone, and I know that you had talked with Jason, and I thought that he was asking you to discuss this possibility with the Park and Rec, because I had not heard that this had moved forward at all. Okay, so if you want to just go straight down that hallway to meeting room B, they'll be happy to discuss that with you. Thank you.
Sounds like a wonderful idea. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we'll give Eileen just a minute. Thank you. Okay. Seeing as there's no one else in the audience now, I will close citizen participation. That's one way to end it. Item 6, approved Plan Commission minutes from February 12th.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion?
I'm going to abstain from voting since I was not present.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed or abstained? Abstained. Motion carries. Item 7, amend the village's zoning regulations, Chapter 510, with regard to incidental outdoor display in the Light Industrial District and General Industrial District, MDC East Troy LLC. Josh Manti, applicant, application 2024-03. I will open the public hearing, and Tim, do you want to, I know we kind of talked about this at the last meeting, but there was still some lack of clarity and a lot of questions, so can you walk us through this one?
Sure. And
Basically, this was a result from the last meeting when they talked about doing this, and we said, well, there's not a provision to allow it. So we said that text amendment is the only way that you can do this, and they submitted the application for the text amendment, and that's what you have before you. And essentially, we have a land use in the zoning code that allows for incidental outdoor display associated with commercial and industrial. And if you look at the chart in the land use table, the chart, it's allowed in various zoning districts, commercial, industrial, but not in the light industrial and general industrial districts. So the proposal is to allow that land use in the light industrial and general industrial as required in the zoning code regulations. Top of page 2, there are some findings that the zoning administrator is supposed to make. I kind of found it a little bit hard to make any definitive determination on some of these because it's a policy question. There's no right or wrong. In terms of the process, again, obviously this is a public hearing. Planning Commission will make a recommendation to the village board if you're so inclined. And then, presumably the developer would come back with a specific plan to allow the proposed use on their property.
Questions for Tim? Sorry, I'm trying to go back through your bullets. Where were you looking? Which number is more of a question of policy?
Well, many of the findings, again, there's nothing definitively to say that this does, advance the public, welfare, so on and so forth. I'm just saying it's not inconsistent with that provision, so.
And I guess if you make this modification, then this is open to anything that's zoned light industrial or general industrial.
Yep.
Are we then, if it is open to any general, or not general industrial, but light industrial? Difference is what I'm asking. Because my question is, though, do we have options in accordance to what is being stored as opposed to the zoning? You know what I'm saying, as far as the items / materials / whatever's being stored on the property?
So again, we do have a classification for that incidental outdoor display. The definition is there. So it is pretty all-inclusive, refers to the sale and display of merchandise or equipment.
And there's a 25% restriction.
Yes.
I could see a general industrial. If somebody's building equipment or something, they might want to have an example or two sitting out there, but
And I guess I would use MP Systems as an example. They store most of their vehicles inside, I think, but, there might be some construction companies or some companies that may have to keep things outside.
I think the part about this for me that, I'm not trying to be difficult for MDC here, but it kind of gives me pause is we do have, most of our light industrial and general industrial is in fact in and around that business park, but we have light industrial elsewhere. We do have a small pocket of it actually deep in the village right off of ES there, and we recently redid some of that there. So, that type of business there is not necessarily going to have any displays, but.
You've got some right here.
Well, that's highway business, though.
But the lots that abut I-43, are those industrial or are those highway business?
Oh, you're talking over here by the Road Ranger?
Yes.
Yeah, those are light industrial, I believe. I'm trying to pull up the map right now.
So if you're so inclined, you could certainly say that that use is allowed as a conditional use within those two industrial districts.
I would be more apt to do that because I'm afraid of opening the door to letting stuff come into town against our ordinance, what we want to see here in town. So I would be more inclined to do that.
That's my inclination. I tend to, because I think a blanket opening of this is not what we want.
Yeah, 100% agree with you.
All right, so before we close the public hearing to move on to motions, any other questions or discussion? So what would be I guess, how should we word that motion, Tim?
So there is a draft ordinance that's attached. And basically, the section that basically makes the change is at the bottom of the page, section 1. So we would just revise that to say, as permitted as a conditional use in the light industrial, general industrial districts. So the motion would be to recommend approval of the ordinance as revised.
So if we open this up to a conditional use, then anybody with a light industrial, general industrial can go back in and go for the conditional use. So we'll have oversight.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
We good? Any other questions? All right, close the public hearing. All right, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution as amended. The ordinance as amended with section 1 being changed to be as permitted by conditional use within those areas.
I'll second.
All right, any other questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 8, amend the village's zoning regulations, regulations, chapter 510 with regard to screening of outdoor storage areas in the mixed business/light industrial design overlay district, MDC East Troy LLC, Jesh Mantai, applicant, application 2024-04. So I will open that public hearing. And so then I guess this is the screening of the proposed outdoor display. Is that right, Tim?
So there is a difference between what we just did and the vehicle yard for MDC, I think it is. That one is classified as, okay, so,
Well, that's like the construction yard, right?
right, it's outdoor storage and wholesaling. So that use is different than what we just did. What we just did was more, merchandise and things that you might find out in front of the building. Okay. So what we're proposing to do, or what the proposal is, again, this is coming from developer, is to amend the section of the code that requires screening around that outdoor storage area. And it basically leaves it up to the Plan Commission to, on a case-by-case basis, to defer that screening if, for whatever reason, it's really not needed. And that's, maybe the case here. I mean, there's no other land uses around there. There's nothing to screen from. So that's what's being proposed.
But it could happen at a later date.
Right. So the way it would conceivably work, if this language was passed, it would basically, again, come before the Plan Commission as part of a site plan, and you can say, it makes sense to have screening in this part, but over here, it really doesn't make sense. but we want to come back and revisit that in 5, 10 years or whatever, and at that time, then you can require screening.
So again, we have control and oversight.
I will make a motion.
Hang on, we're still in the public
Oh, I'm
hearing.
sorry, we're still in
So,
public.
Any other questions? Okay.
So that time frame, Tim, that you were talking about, is it in this ordinance here, or?
No, it's basically undefined.
Okay.
Basically, you can say, no, it's not needed, period, or you can defer that to a later date. And as part of that site plan, then you would say, we want to come back in 5 years or 3 years or whatever, and it's, part of the approval, and then at that time, then you could revisit, and then again, you can defer it longer, or you can say, no, it's needed now.
Like, the business wouldn't need it for 15 years, but then if it's sold or changes, then it may be needed, correct?
Or something happens next door. Right.
Any other questions? All right, I'll close the public hearing.
I will make a motion to recommend to the village board the proposed text amendments set forth in the draft ordinance dated February 19th, 2024.
I will second that.
Okay, any questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 9 remains on hold related to Overlook Ridge, so we will move past that and on to item 10. Discussion related to the regulation of polystructures as an accessory use in residential zoning districts. We talked about this a while back. Tim has a memo here with some information. I love how you included a picture not from the village. Good call. Did not want to call anybody out. We did have one resident complain about a neighbor who had one of these, these structures, and I know Tim had some, or actually it was Jeremy, the police chief, had some pictures throughout the village. No one has approached me specifically. I don't know if anybody's approached you all about this. Is this something based on what Tim's got here and kind of our thoughts on it from the last? Is this something that we want to leave on here? Do we want to take action? Are we, do we want to, take action to allow it, take action to explicitly disallow it?
I guess what's the issue with the police chief you're talking about? Is it just ugliness or safety or what?
Yeah, the resident who complained, I think it was ugliness. The aesthetics was not what they were envisioning to see out their kitchen window or wherever their view of their neighbor is. And it's a similar structure as to this one here in Tim's picture, because I've walked by it and I've seen it. And I think there were varying degrees of that. Some very, much like a tarp, kind of like in this picture, and then others I think we saw that were more of, well, that's almost a permanent carport, but not quite. And yeah, and a party tent as well. So I think, to Tim's memo here, it technically, they would not be allowed under our existing, ordinance. And so does that mean then, okay, so should we direct code compliance to, cite these individuals, these property owners? Is this something that we remain silent on? Do we say we're going to allow them and put restrictions? Or are we going to update the code to explicitly disallow them? What are your thoughts?
I guess my initial thought was to, if we were to change the ordinance for this, to grandfather the ones that are already out there so they don't have to tear them down.
I think our discussion last time, Tim, do you need to go?
So basically, a polystructure like what's in the picture is a violation. You can't grandfather a violation. You can grandfather a situation where you change the rules, where what was, now in violation was established legally. That's grandfathering. So you can do that by virtue of adopting a new rule or regulation that, again, disallows what was originally legally established. Okay, so.
I think we need to distinguish polystructures from permanent carports. And I believe we should allow permanent carports if somebody needs to cover their boat in their driveway, but it's got to be something permanent, and it's got to be permitted, it's got to be bolted to the driveway.
Does it have to be permitted through the building
It
department?
would have to be, yeah, because it's going to be a permanent structure. So it's something that would have to be permitted, but I think these polystructures, I have no problem if somebody needs an extra storage in their backyard as long as it fits within the ordinance, but I don't want to see them in the front yard. I don't want to cite the residents that have them, but I wouldn't mind sending code compliance to just, here's a little warning, here's, we have to remove this as against the ordinance. But I think we need to distinguish permanent carports from polystructures and party tents.
I had a thought in regards to that. I know some people would put these up to keep snow off their vehicles because they can't park it in the garage since maybe their boat or other stuff is usually, you get a 2.5 car garage, you only get one car in it. But maybe, and again, I'm just throwing this out there for discussion purposes, that if they were, they'd be allowed to put these up to keep the snow off, say, from November to February or March. I don't know. I'm not advocating it. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I don't think giving a time slot is going to work for something like that. It's either we're going to allow it or we're not going to allow it. But as long as we set guidelines to allow these, because if you go into other states, you see these permanent carports, they're everywhere. So as long as it's tastefully done, and we have to find a way to word that correctly of what we're going to allow and what we're not going to allow.
There you go.
So plastic or canvas or, polystructures, not allowed.
A blue tarp?
Okay,
I think any soft material not allowed. It's got to be the aluminum or tin roof, non-poly structure
Right.
with a permanent frame, and that something like that would have to be bolted to the ground also for safety.
right. So, that, the covering on a carport can come in various materials. Sometimes you just see horizontal metal. Is that something that's going to be okay?
Like a shed roof attached to an existing structure to extend out over an area?
No, it's
Like a
basically.
lean-to? Is that what you're referring?
Well, yeah, that's kind of a separate thing. I guess I'm talking about the material on a carport, whether it's used for a car or storage of any kind.
Pole
or a
barns, are you
boat.
talking about pole barn siding like?
Right.
Okay.
So basically, you see them at, I want to say Costco, but, Fleet Farm, so on and so forth. It's the metal siding that's horizontal, and it goes all the way up, all the way down. And is that okay, or do you want to see it vertical, or, does it have to be painted, or stainless, or galvanized metal? Is that okay?
I mean, I get what you're saying, that it's how do we narrow it down? I don't know. I don't have the answer. I think it's going to take a lot of discussion, but we can't allow polystructures like this. So do we just say nothing, nada in the front yard? I think we're going to have a lot of upset residents if we do that.
So basically, I'm going to borrow this. Yeah, sure. So basically, you do have standards for accessory buildings. You can only have so much, and you can only have a certain number. They're always in the side yard or the rear yard, not in the front. Okay, so we don't have to change that. So the only thing that you would have to change if you wanted to go down this road is on the flip side, page 2, under subsection D, where it talks about materials. Okay, basically it's saying if you're going to build a shed or a detached garage, it's got to have, pretty close to the materials that are on the house. You typically don't find horizontal, roof siding on a house. The other consideration is maybe you would allow that kind of metallized building, but only up to a certain size. I don't think you would want to see a pole barn.
Like a yard shed, more like.
Right. Of a certain size, it can be, any kind of metal, whatever.
So I think you know what I'm referring to with the actual carports with the tin roof like this. They're pretty common, but we can't really restrict somebody to using a particular product. So, but I see what you're saying, we can't just allow somebody to put up a flat roof. But that wouldn't fit within the ordinance. Can you do a flat roof on an outdoor structure in the ordinance?
And the other thing too is, basically what we're talking about are buildings, right? And a carport may or may not be enclosed. Yep. And, I think there's a difference between,
Those supports, though, are bolted down to either concrete or to structure.
right? But I think there's something of a difference between a carport that's, open, that's used for a boat or a car, as opposed to boxes of junk, right? So it's kind of a sticky wicket.
Could end up with a Harbor Freight special.
So one of my concerns with, what we're talking about and kind of the example that Lori just shared is, and the pictures that we saw as well, is the actual securing of it. So, and think about all the high winds we've had lately. I'm worried about, that sheet metal roofing, let's call it, coming off, or the poles are not properly secured.
Well, if it was something that was permitted, it'd have to be inspected also.
Right, that's what I'm just saying, like, to what, we'll have to either define that or go under some existing, structure requirements.
I would have to talk to Scott, our building inspector, to see what it's written up as, but it could be considered an outbuilding, or what's the other fancy $5 word?
It's an accessory structure, but it
There you
depends
go.
on,
That's what I was thinking of.
it depends on the size. Some of these are really quite large, and you would want to keep that in mind. I'm looking through some pictures quick, because I Googled metal carports, and yeah.
It makes perfect sense, Lori, because like you said, though, people are talking about a carport. We're not talking about parking a whole fleet inside of something.
Well, and I think we also have to be careful, think about, we have a particular property right now that is technically not in compliance with a large number of vehicles that are parked outside, that so are they going to start building a ton of these and they go, oh, I see, I put it
Yeah.
under a roof?
But
Matt,
there's
I
an
agree.
ordinance as to how much you can have on your property, so.
Not only that, but then you could also set up how many of these you would allow, too. Not just what you would allow on the property, but one carport per property, I don't know. But the other side of this thing, some people do store pontoon boats or other items, and they may wrap them in the wintertime with a brown tarp or something of that nature. But that technically would not be a violation of this, what we're just discussing now, correct? Okay.
To cover. So I do want to highlight that the Plan Commission previously addressed, or talked about, I should say, polystructures back in 2020. But that was more from a shipping container standpoint, but no action was taken. So no ordinance changes occurred. And shipping containers are a hot subject in the town right now.
So I think this can get really messy, but I don't think kicking the can down the road is going to benefit us in any way, shape, or form. I think we need to nip this.
As far as shipping containers go, Matt, yes, you hit right on the head, because we had somebody who was going to be out at our airport a while back, they were going to do some work out there, some kind of scientific work, I don't know what they were going to do, but they wanted to propose using storage or shipping containers stacked up as a building, as their office. And we said no, because once, if they're all done, who's going to take it away? And it's,
So I tend to agree with you, Chris, that we need to be declarative. I think the problem is right now is we have people using it, and it is a violation as the ordinance. So I guess the question is, if we want to allow this to some degree that we've been debating, or do we just want to say, no, this is completely not allowed, and just turn it over to code of compliance?
Do we have any businesses that use this type of thing?
Not that, and I was just, as we were talking here, I was trying to find Jeremy's photos. I couldn't find them. I don't know if we know what.
Is this the type of a structure that's been being used for McPherson? Or for Nigelson with the boat storage?
Well, for McPherson, that was actually approved as part of the site plan, so I think that's a lot different than what we're talking about.
Remembering Jeremy's presentation, I don't recall any businesses. I mean, it's a good question. I don't know of any that are using that.
And if you recall some of those photos, I mean, he was taking pictures of these polystructures, whatever. But if you look at it, they are in violation of any other number of setback issues. So it's just not the building itself. I mean, they're too close to the side yard and so on and so forth, so.
I'm inclined not to like go straight to finding people, but, as I think, I'm sorry, one of you said, just politely saying, hey, this is not in compliance, and if they would like it, they can always come, and petition us as the Plan Commission to reevaluate this too. I mean, we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. Remember, there are some, but it's not like every house in the village has this as a problem. So we have to balance, how much time are we going to put on this versus how many people are being affected and number of vehicles and so forth.
I think stage one, code compliance gets involved with what's out there right now.
Yes, right, code compliance should get into it, but there are some that Jeremy had that he took pictures of that looked like a junk shed. Now, if you want to take and have a set size, we'll say 10 by 12 or 10 by 15, so you get at least one car in there. But to have the structure, you're going to have to put a footing in for each post that you have. And we're going to say maybe 6 or 8 inch round, at least 3 foot down, and on both sides. And you can use tin, either up and down or sideways, but no, like you say, no plastic or vinyl or anything like that.
Are you going to also stipulate, would we stipulate that it would be for vehicle storage only?
Yeah, yes.
Aren't there limits to the number and sizes of accessory structures allowed? Well, if it falls into the accessory structure, then that would play into it too.
You get 2 accessory buildings, one of which can't exceed 150 square feet, and then the other one is based on the size of the property, and that's in that schedule there.
So many square feet per size of property.
Right.
What, this isn't an accessory building per se? So do we need to define this separately from an accessory building?
So a carport, storage shed is an accessory building. Or it could be a
Would you say
greenhouse or a
vehicle-
gazebo.
Vehicle storage shed as opposed to car, but I don't know. I just, like you said, we just didn't want to see a bunch of junk stored in them either.
But we don't allow accessory buildings in the front yard either, and these are gonna be basically on the driveway. So how do we distinguish?
On the side or?
Either on the side or it's gonna be in the driveway, like what we see right now with the carports? So accessory buildings have to be on the side or in the rear. So again, this is a completely separate issue, which we have to define somehow as a separate issue. Or am I way off base?
Okay, I found some of the pictures. This would be helpful. Eileen, could you pull up the Plan Commission packet from July 10th? The 2023. And it's past Steve Lambrecht's presentation on the church. And so, yeah, here we go. All right, so it's always helpful to have pictures. I like pictures. All right, that right there, you can see it, look, that's a tent. That is being held down.
That's on Main Street.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, so so that's a tent. And I don't think that's what we're discussing here. That starts to get more, it's, yeah,
Matt, go back to the first one, though. It's being used as a carport.
I understand, but I'm talking about, it's got, I mean, it's tied down, it's staked down. So you get winds like we had the past couple of weeks. Yeah, and there's no car in the picture, but.
There was a car on the picture tonight.
And that's another structure. Again, I think the left-hand side, looking at that, maybe even sitting on concrete, so I don't know how it's secured. If we keep going, there's a couple others.
Matt, if you go back to the previous one, that yellow whatever is right on the property boundary line.
So you have a setback issue there.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other,
Backs, a lot of these houses are at the setback. Like, if there's a
Right.
25-foot setback from the street, a lot of the houses are at the 25-foot setback. So you wouldn't allow a structure in that setback area.
This one, again, looks like it's weighted on the right-hand side. It's not secured.
There's one on the left, it's just in the shadow.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about on the right, though, it's just weighted, so.
So if we don't find an alternative to this, though, we're going to have a parade of residents in here complaining about this. So, I mean, ultimately, yeah, I'd love to say no, none of them. They're not allowed, they're against the ordinance. It's true, they're a code violation, but I'm trying to find some common ground with the residents to allow something like this.
Yeah, but I think I go back to like this one here, the parking of the boat there is perfectly acceptable. It's the structure, and, you know, as Forty pointed out, there are coverings for your boat to do that with. So I think the next one is the one that gave us, or sorry, two. This one, again, it's a tent. If we go to the last one, that's the second to last one. We'll go to the last one here. This one, I don't know if this is on the side, but this starts to actually approach an actual construction as opposed to all the others. So what I'm hearing from the conversation, I'm going to kind of restate what I hear you all saying. Correct me if I'm saying this wrong. We want to provide a path. I think, though, the challenge is you still got to meet your setback requirements, and you got to meet the requirements or restrictions that we place on the front of the house. That's going to stop 95, 98% of these. Let's say this is not the front of the house, this is in the rear or to the side or whatever, and it meets setback requirements, then
You just nailed it, that's the answer.
that's the answer. So because we're not going to, I don't think we were interested in creating an exception category. Well, you can't put anything in the front except for this, right? That's not what where we're going. So you've got to meet setback requirements, you've got to meet the restrictions on the front, and therefore then it needs to be constructed in a way that fits in as an accessory building.
Is there going to be a requirement that the building inspector look at it?
Well, I guess yeah, that's my point, is then it should be treated under, have you done what you need to do about setbacks? Have you done what you need to do about frontage restrictions? Yes, okay. Now it's an accessory building. Same thing as if I want to build any other accessory building, I got to go through that process. So I guess my question is, under that scenario that I've laid out, unless you all disagree with my scenario, which is fine, what is there to change? Is there really anything to change?
Code enforcement.
Well, that's the operational side of it, but is there, I agree with you.
It's not code enforcement, though, in regards to following the building inspector. See, the code enforcement is different from the building inspector's office. Ergo, that when somebody's going to have to, like Tim is saying, to anchor, make sure it's anchored down, or you've got certain,
But you're already too far. We're step number 1, code enforcement to clean up what's out there right now.
Correct.
And step 2, accessory building, it goes into, there's, like Matt said, 95% of these are not going to be approved, and nobody's going to want to go through the process of building one of these. So it's going to kind of nip it without even doing anything.
I just wanted to make sure that if that was going to be needed, that we gave Scott a heads up so he knew
So-
what was coming.
So, Tim, I guess for clarification, let's say that I want to build an accessory structure, and it happens to look kind of like this, and it's in my backyard. I have to get a permit for that, right?
But you also can't drive a car around your house unless you have a driveway. So the only place that's going to be allowed is on the side of your house with an approach going to it. So done, solved.
Currently, the way it's written, it would have to be set 10 feet away from the residential structure, right? Meet the side yard setbacks, and the materials need to match the residential structure.
So in this scenario,
Hold on, Tim has something to add.
so I was just going to, at the 10 feet, that's not 10 feet from the structure then? Okay. So that might be one modification we might need to adjust.
So that's a building code issue, fire code. So basically, you can't have two structures next to each other that could, transfer fire from one to the next unless it's fire coded or fire rated walls. So yeah, I'm not sure if this would, qualify in that case. So.
Yeah, it may be that then, polystructures have to be of a, you can help us with this wording, but of a more permanent nature, but if they're not fully enclosed, then, the 10-foot setback, because it's not really a full-on building.
So I can double check with Scott in terms of when the fire code would apply and not.
That would be a good question, because right now, theoretically, from what I'm seeing, if that structure were gone, if the support legs and the aluminum roof were gone, and the car was just parked there, there would not be a violation, correct? Correct. But yet, it would still be a fire hazard, according to what we're saying, that if you put the structure there, there's, you see where I'm going with this? And it's kind of, huh?
And I think that's the clarity we need. So this, out of all the pictures we saw, and I think Jeremy found almost all of them in the village, is the closest to what we see as needing to reevaluate what's in the accessory building area.
Do you know, is that the same house or is that two different houses there?
So again, just all the others, though, have other issues beyond the fact that they're a polystructure. So that immediately invalidates them. And so until we have we have a long line of people who can meet all of those other requirements banging on our door to understand how to do a polystructure, I think this is where we hand it over to code compliance, and then we get the clarification just on this. Does that sound like a good plan of action?
So just to clarify, basically, again, we've got a whole section talking about materials. And the intent is to modify that to allow something like like the last one, but only for vehicle storage. Is that correct?
Assuming we don't have a fire code issue.
Right, I mean, that
Yes.
applies to all accessory
Yep.
buildings, whether.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what I'm hearing from you all.
So I think we want to define this as part of the accessory buildings, but has to meet all the restrictions and setbacks and everything else. But we also want to allow this type of building, right? The structure.
Right.
Instead of having to be the same materials as the house, this would be the deviation from that.
Right. Again, as part of that same section, we will say, even though it's implied here, we will say polystructures, soft-sided structures are specifically prohibited. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, by specifically, not to get too technical, but by specifically prohibiting them, are you getting in a territory where then it's questionable whether somebody can erect like a party tent for a weekend party?
In the front yard.
Is that covered under temporary uses, or? I just want to make sure that we aren't getting like so technical that now all of a sudden somebody puts up a party tent and that's a violation.
Right.
That's just like putting up a party tent for,
Lions Club.
well, line stuff for the Mace rummage sale. Somebody will put up something like that.
Right. So basically, a party tent is a temporary use, allowed over, 7 days or 3 days or whatever. And if it's not already in the code, I've got stock language that does specifically talk to party tents. And we can, throw that in here again to differentiate between a party tent that's temporary and something that's more of a permanent storage accessory building.
Yeah, I think anything beyond the 7 to 30 day, right, somewhere in there is, okay, you intend to leave this here.
Right. Typically, a party tent, again, I can certainly play with the numbers, but, 3 days. It goes up a day before the event, day after, it's gone.
Hey, we're going to get this off of our agenda here hopefully soon. So, good discussion. Anything else on this? Okay, item 11, recommendations for future agendas. So tiny homes as accessory uses in residential zoning districts. Probably a good conversation given our previous meeting around housing. Revise application requirements for rezoning petitions and potential regulations/information related to front yard setbacks on side-loaded homes. Okay? Anything to add to the list?
Yes. There's something in the, I want to say it's in the comp plan in regards to single-family homes versus rental. We had a ratio, and that got blown away when they built, the old Burns School property, I thought. The board had decided that it was fine, even though.
It was in the downtown district, which was
Downtown
one of the exceptions, yeah.
Okay. So we're looking at revising that, getting rid of it, because he's adding another 149 apartments on ES. So the ratio, it was like 30% or something like that, whatever
You're
it
right,
was.
Ed. You're right. But you're talking single-family versus multifamily.
So I think what Ed, so correct me if I'm wrong here, Ed, there was a ratio, I believe it was 30%, is that right, Eileen?
That is correct.
And that we wouldn't approve any rezoning that would push us beyond that, but there were a number of outs that, well, this doesn't apply. One was downtown district.
Okay.
And so the board had extended that to that property for potentially that development, or as a part of a TID, and I think there's a few others. But I think given, regardless of anybody's personal feelings on that, on any of those, I think that's a good thing for us to revisit, given our previous conversation and, overall, just taking a look at the comprehensive plan. So I would almost just put on here like comprehensive plan and multi-use versus, mixed use.
Yes, and I think one of the other exceptions was for senior housing.
Okay? Good, thank you. Good call out. All right, no other items to add?
Well, I think you brought up the storage containers. I thought we approved something, but if not, I think we're very close to closing that one down if we want to revisit that one. I know there's a lot of discussion about it.
I guess I'd have to dust off my notes, because I know we talked about it, and I think it got set on the back burner. But I don't know if there was just no consensus, or we just got waylaid with some other things. So here again, I know we talked about it, but again, I don't know the reason why.
That particular business owner chose to go a different path, and so I don't think it became as urgent as it was back when you guys looked at it before. But given that it's a hot topic in the adjacent municipality, we might want to dust it off, to Roger's point.
So is the intent to allow a shipping container as an
Well,
accessory
if-
building?
Pretty soon, somebody's going to bring in 20 containers and want to make a multifamily building.
I mean, I think we're going to need to address it because you can actually order, it's not a shipping container, but it ultimately has the same shape as a shipping container from Amazon for about less than $10,000, and now it's a livable structure. So I do think we need to address things like that, the tiny home. I think all of these are intersections on the same theme, which is affordable, tiny, and I'm going to stick it on the back of my property that I already own. I'm not going to go, buy it, and either I'm going to have a family member live there, I'm going to rent it out. I mean, I think these are all the concerns. Now, just taking a shipping container that, right off of a rail car or, and dropping it in your backyard, that's not what we want. But there are ways of doing these things that a lot of communities are doing that are not eyesores, and I think some of what I saw that you guys had worked on was, well, you can't just toss a shipping container, you have to make some improvements to it so that it's aesthetically going to work.
And I believe it was considered an accessory building, but they had to take the structure and kind of like rebuild it, put a new frame around it, put a new roof on it.
Right.
To make it look pleasing to the eye, yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, just talking about housing, just, affordability. The villages has a provision in the code that allows accessory dwelling units for 15 years.
I think we need to have a serious conversation about, and there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. What are other municipalities in Wisconsin doing around these topics? And then we can decide, what do we like, what do we not like, what are the concerns, what does it mean? I think, we've had this poly structure on here for a while. I think, we finally got to, a conclusion in this meeting. Let's try to do the same thing on this topic. Okay, next meeting is April 8th. I always love the if needed. I believe it will be needed. All right, with that, I will make a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. All right, meeting adjourned.